Jonathan Bennett is on gunkle duty with Jaraj Krisa, who he ends up falling for and cuddling up with in the perfect Christmas sweaters.
Oh, hi!
What are you looking at?
My amazing toy collection, Kevin. What, you're not looking at this? Hi, welcome back to Fruity Cereal. I'm Connor.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Shanata Bliss, your freestyle dance instructor.
You made that joke in episode 3, Kevin.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
Fuck me with a cactus.
Anyway, welcome back once again. Already off to a great start. Oh, God, Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Connor.
That's great. I'm finally over whatever was plaguing me last week, so I'm feeling great.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were sick. I forgot.
I was so very sick.
But not with COVID, though.
It was not Cronova. No, it was just
not Cronova.
A weird little stomach bug. I think it was the undercooked turkey.
Oh no, you had a Marjorie Taylor Greene turkey?
I did.
Oh no.
Oh God, you're gonna somehow spin this on Twitter into it like Connor attends Marjorie Taylor Greene Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Connor, where were you January 6th?
Oh God, at Jimmy Pesto's. That's a deep. Is that a deep cut? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think enough people know.
Well, the people at the Bob's Burgers fandom know at the very least.
That's true, yeah.
Oh God. Just anyway. Well, I don't know what to talk about, so mug of the day, I guess.
Yes, booty and bees.
Yeah, and it goes with my ugly Christmas. I have so many. I'm gonna be wearing one of these every day up until New Year's. So prepare to see more ugly Christmas sweaters coming down the line.
Wow, you certainly have a lot of those.
I absolutely do. I'm saving
the
Wizard
of
Oz
one for. Are they all Disney?
Oh no! I've got a Wizard of Oz one. I've got a Freddy Krueger one. They span all fandoms.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I've got a Harley Quinn one. That's probably going to be next week. So
diversity in your consumerism.
Absolutely. Oh gosh,
Connor, we have a guest today.
When were you going to tell me this? You're just going to drop this on me right now? I'm not prepared. What the fuck?
Well, get prepared, bitch. I don't know what to tell you.
I don't like this.
So Connor, do you remember a few episodes ago when you were talking about how men's clothing is boring and it always has been boring and it's never changed?
Men's formal wear. That is the hill I'm prepared to die on until somebody can prove me wrong.
Well, we have our guest today might just prove you wrong.
I hope so.
So everyone on the podcast, please welcome clothing historian Caleb Burch.
Hey.
Hi, Caleb.
Hey.
Hi there. Welcome. I have been waiting for this episode for quite some time. I'm very excited to get into it.
A couple of episodes at least.
Okay, now Caleb, I introduced you as a clothing historian, but your Instagram says that you're a time traveling werewolf.
Oh wow, I forgot about.
So to quote Oprah, so what is the truth?
Oh my gosh. No, I don't know.
Oh my God.
I don't know if I shared that online, if I'm legally allowed to. I might.
Wait a minute, Caleb. Is tonight a full moon?
No, it is not.
It's not. Okay. The moon has been
you got a
waiting
couple hours anyway. So
right, but you told us that you couldn't do it tonight. I'm kind of wondering, is that why?
Oh my gosh. No, that's
okay. Okay, well, safety first, so
safety first.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I always have a hard time when people ask what my actual job title is, explaining it, because I kind of do so many different things. But yeah, I think you kind of got it pretty close at the start. I have collected vintage men's clothing for probably going on 15 years now. I started a business selling it a few years ago, back in 2018. And I do that full time, but I also make historical clothing from the 1700s back. I do everything from like the Bronze Age, the Roman Empire, up through the American Revolution.
My God.
So it's kind of two different jobs that kind of are also part of the same job.
So you sell authentic vintage clothing, but you also create, you recreate vintage clothing as well.
Yeah. So there's always been this big debate between what's considered vintage and what's considered historical. Generally, people kind of go with anything up until like the 1870s or 1880s is considered vintage. Everything after or earlier than the 1880s is considered historical. So like, an original something from the 1700s would be considered historical or antique rather than vintage, whereas vintage would be, anything from the 20s, 30s, 40s up now through the 90s, which is weird to think that that's considered vintage now, but it is. I always feel weird when I don't do a whole lot of 90s stuff on my vintage site. My big cutoff is usually around the 70s, unless it's something that's just super cool. But I always feel weird, like putting vintage 1990s jacket in the description. I'm like, oh.
That's how anytime I go on eBay, I'm looking like for like toys or collectibles, and they're like vintage Little Mermaid doll or whatever. And it's like, I remember when this was on a television commercial.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's all relative, because then, like, my grandfather was born in 1928, so stuff that would be considered vintage to us and our parents, to him, he's like, yeah, that's not vintage to me.
That was something, because I took a very brief costume history class when I was in college 100 years ago, and one thing that when we were talking about, like, if you were doing like a period piece, like if you're doing like Shakespeare or like Tartuffe or something like that, it would be considered like period clothing, historical clothing,
right,
if it was not worn by somebody at like a nursing home. Like, so if I went to like, Shady Pines and like somebody there was like, oh yeah, I wore that when I was like 10 years old in 1910, that would be considered vintage. But if it's like worn by somebody who was like dead for a certain amount of time, that would be like historic.
And I think that's kind of why like the established, but it still fluctuates, but like is like 1870s, 1880s, like at least you kind of go at least to your great grandparents.
Yeah, that could.
Because like my great grandparents.
So basically the difference between historic and vintage is if there's anybody alive to remember it, it's vintage, but if there isn't, it's historic.
That's a decent way to look at it. It's kind of a gray area. It's kind of, there's not really an exact science to it.
Right.
It's kind of all up to personal interpretation. Because there's I used to be a member of a very big vintage menswear group on Facebook, and that used to be the argument all the time, because the description says anything that men used to wear, is applicable on this page. But then when someone would post, oh, here's a, 1620s men's coat that I made based off an original painting, you would always get this like just group that would be like, that's not vintage, that's historical, that's
terrible.
And it's like, and that the admins would have to be like, nope, read our description, that's still applicable on this group. Like people. So then it ended up, I think the group kind of devolved, because then there were people like me back in because this was back in my back when I had a much harder time resisting the urge to troll on the internet. So I would start posting pictures on there in my Roman stuff and be like, is this vintage enough for you? And they would just get so mad. Like some of the guys, you could just feel the hatred. And it was funny. And then the group kind of just ended up falling apart, because there were all these like purists that were like, I refuse to be a member of this group. This group's lost all its respect. Because, because everybody has their own idea of what's considered appropriate. So like these guys, it was anything from the 20s through the 70s was what they considered vintage.
I love how like the format between this like fan base and like, I don't know, like teenagers on Fortnite is exactly the same. There's the purists, the elitists.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's even worse. Like the vintage community is its own kind of thing, but what's even worse is the reenactment.
Oh,
Like, a lot of my friends do drag. My partner does drag. Like, and we connect so well on it because even though they're polar opposites on what they are, the culture is it's so much the same. Like there's so much shit talking. There is like the only time that you'll see grown men get angry about like the drape of some fabric or a button is at a drag show or at a reenactment. Like those are the two groups that will absolutely lose their mind because of something. I'm sorry, the dog just woke up from a nap. So yeah, it's hilarious because like, you know, like my drag friends will be like ranting about it and I'm like, I actually can relate to this.
It's like there's a Venn diagram of that.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah,
and we love Venn diagrams.
They'll literally, be like, oh, that you can tell that dress isn't made out of the right kind of fabric because it doesn't drape the same way that one made out of the good fabric would. And then you literally go to a reenactment, same thing. You can tell that's not real wool because it's hilarious. It's like
is there anybody at the reenactment community who's like, I don't want to see any fucking H&M on my runway?
Oh yeah. I mean, I mean, there you can get into because with a lot of the time periods, there are like big mainstream sellers, and their stuff is kind of made for like entry level. You know, you can go on there, you can buy a whole outfit for $200 and you can, you know, just go have fun. But there are like people that are like hardcore, like, you know, if you show up to one of my events wearing a hat from this company, you are going to be, you know, sent back to the parking lot. Like, I
actually have a story that kind of relates to this. Again, 100 years ago when I'm in college, a production that we were doing was selected to go perform at this thing called the American College Theater Festival in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And it was really cool because you got to see like other schools, how they did certain shows and things, whatever. And there was this one school doing whatever the period piece was. I don't know. Let's call it like, I don't know, Uncle Vanya or whatever. And they had like a costume showcase workshop where they had like all the costumes and they showed the people who designed them, who brought them to life, so to speak. And I remember there was this one woman. She wasn't like part of like the panelists or like she wasn't like any authority figure. She just came in here, went over to this, like it was like a big elaborate wool ensemble. It was like almost like a ball gown style thing with like, you know, fur trim and all that sort of stuff. But the inside was lined so that, you know, an actress under hot pot lights isn't gonna like sweat her ass off. Right. And she is just tearing it to shreds, being like, this type of wool wouldn't have been, first of all, they would have used authentic rabbit's fur or some shit like that. And everybody is watching her with this look on their face like, this is for a theater show. What the? She's not trying to like go into like the Arctic tundra and like, you know, fetch like, you know, meat and grains for her family.
That's
an actress.
That's a very common thing that you see with a lot of vintage and reenactment people is that, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I do it for fun, you know, like if I'm watching a historical movie or something, I'm going to be like, yeah, that's not right for that. You know, they didn't use that or whatever. Like that's kind of the joke, but there are some people that just absolutely go way, way, way too far with it. And it just becomes an ego trip after that.
Oh yeah.
Connor, you said that like Lauren was like that with like hospital stuff, right?
Yeah, my friend Lauren, she's a pharmacist, and we were watching Halloween 2. It's the movie set primarily in a hospital. She spent the whole movie being like, why is there nobody in the maternity ward? Why is she not wearing white shoes? Why is she carrying a syringe full of air?
And everybody has their own niche about stuff. I mean, it's just like military stuff. You know, you see military stuff in movies, and it's if you're around somebody that knows, they're going to be like, yeah, no, that's not the right way to do that. I mean, yeah, everybody has their niche, and so that's why, you know, I think as long as it's in, you know, in fun, then it's, you know, there's no problem with it. But when you're losing sleep over it, it's kind of like, okay, all right.
That's Kevin with the Jurassic Park movies.
He
loses sleep if a dinosaur doesn't have feathers, and he is
fuming. Here's the thing. I can excuse it in the Jurassic Park series because they're all genetically recreated, and like any kind of scientific inaccuracy, you could just write off as just genetic meddling.
That's fair. That's fair.
Like they even kind of acknowledge it in I think Jurassic World, the first Jurassic World movie. Like, you know, I think there's a scene where Dr. Wu says like, well, if our dinosaurs were accurate, they'd look a lot different. And it's like, yeah, they would.
I mean, that's
my story at least related somewhat to clothing. Yours is just dinosaur nerds.
Okay, well, it's all relative. We're talking about like nitpicking stuff, and I'm like, yeah, sometimes I do nitpick about dinosaurs being depicted in media. I'm like, okay, that one's like shrink wrapped. That one doesn't have enough feathers.
I mean,
that one doesn't. This one doesn't have lips. This one has too many lips.
I can actually relate to this though, because I'm
having too many lips.
No. It's I think the whole thing with it is like, if you're doing it for fun or is it a fixation? I
mean, it's mostly for fun. Like,
and I had to learn. I had to learn that over the years. I mean, when I first started doing it, it was it was all consuming. And I mean, now it's mostly all consuming just because it's my job. But other than that, like I've been able to mellow out, and it's when I do it for fun now. And so that's the big thing. And I mean, yeah, the reason I actually started, or I got started in making the historical clothing was totally by accident. Like it wasn't planned. I didn't say, hey, I'm going to start doing this for a living. It was just that I wanted to get into some medieval and some Roman stuff. And at the time there was like no one in the US making the stuff. And there was like, you had to order it from Europe, and it was insanely expensive. And like, I had never sewed a day in my life. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this stuff. And everybody's like, how? You don't have a sewing machine? I'm like, neither did they. So I'm going to figure out how to do it like they did. And then I did. And so for several years, I made my own stuff. It was about 5 or 6 years. I made all my own stuff. And, you know, I had got an Instagram following, got a Facebook following, a Pinterest following. And then during COVID, like right at the start of COVID, one of my Facebook friends who did Roman was supposed to be ordering some Roman clothing and stuff from a guy in Poland, but because everything shut down, he couldn't. And he was like, hey, you know, I know you've been making your own stuff. Would you make it? And I was like, yeah, we're the same size. I've already got all the stuff. Yeah. Just, you know, and I threw out a price. He was like, cool, you know, PayPal me the money, and I made it. And then when he got it, of course, then he tells all his friends. And then because they couldn't get it from anywhere. So then they all start coming to me. And here we are like 3 years later, and I've got a 11-month backlog on orders because people just like, it's weekly that someone's like, hey, I need this made. And
oh my God, we are going on 3 years ever since the pandemic started.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that's fantastic. That's kind of what Kevin and I are hoping with like the podcast is like, you know, one friend tells another friend. And
and it was just totally by accident. I mean, and so now, and when I started, I only did Roman, and then it's like now it expanded into medieval stuff. Now I do 1700s stuff for people. It's just like, anytime I jump into a time period and I start making stuff and I finally get good at making it for myself, I feel comfortable enough to start taking orders from other people.
That's good.
That's awesome.
And it's good that you're actually enjoying it. It's not like I'm grinding to make money.
I am. It is a grind.
Well, yeah. I mean,
and it's the hard part about it. There's several hard parts about it, but one of the big hard parts is I feel like I tend to overwork because I'm doing something that I do enjoy. So I don't actually always feel like I'm working. So I don't feel like I'm working until I'm wore out, until I burn out. And so then I'm like, oh, now I'm working. And so now I've had to learn how to pace myself and remember, like, hey, I've sat here from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. sewing. I have been working all day. This is work. Like I'm, working on a $2,000, 1700s, whatever for somebody. Like I have been working. So I have to remind myself that that's what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, it was just totally by accident. And I mean, honestly, I'm not complaining at all. And that was kind of how the vintage stuff started too, because I had collected it. And then I went through a period where I didn't really feel like wearing it anymore. And so I started selling it and then it took off. And then I started buying it specifically to resell. And that just took off. So both of my things, I didn't actually set out and say, hey, this is what I'm going to turn into a job. They just kind of happened. And yeah, I mean, it's been good. The only issue I will say with the vintage stuff is the market has started getting a little oversaturated. Mostly it was interesting because when COVID happened, my historical clothing business picked up, whereas the vintage one kind of collapsed because
of Bridgerton, isn't it?
No, it was because what it was because so many people were on it. They were out of work. No one was working. They were trying to figure out how to be self-sufficient. And one of the quickest, easiest ways to be self-sufficient, go to the thrift store, buy a ton of vintage clothing, and make an eBay account. And so whereas there were a few really good niche vintage sellers on eBay and Etsy and places like that before COVID, before COVID, I mean, I was putting 5, 10, 12 orders a day out the door. But then after COVID got into full swing and more people started selling vintage, now I average maybe one a day or one every other day now because there's just so many people doing it. All the good thrifting places and the estate sales and everything are all picked over because everybody's doing it now. And there for a while, I kind of decided I thought I wasn't going to do it anymore, but I kind of realized that the thing I do have still going for me is I've already worked on that years worth of a customer base that these people who started during COVID still don't have. So I'm still not being entirely drowned out. They've still got years to go to get the feedback, to get the reviews, get the merchandise that I've got. It's just, I just have to keep grinding at it to keep my head above the water with all the competition.
Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. Got to get on that grind.
If you would like to support Caleb, all of his social medias are on the description down below and on screen. Check out his Etsy, Facebook, and I believe that's also your Instagram on top.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Facebook and Instagram are kind of where I promote most of the historical stuff. I post a lot of I do kind of like a vintage item of the day or a couple of vintage items of the day on my Facebook and Instagram stories.
Because I did see you posted one that I was reading through the stuff that you posted. On November 10th, one of the smaller detail noticed by Inga Haig's book, Textilfund aus Haitabu, or the 16th century tunic is the potential pocket. Whilst it's like so detailed and it's like stuff I didn't think I'd be interested in. And I'm reading every word. I'm like, this is so fucking cool. I'm just The tunic and visible leather pouch are both made by me. And I was like, this is fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried the thing that I try to do on my social media stuff with that sort of thing is I try to at least make it somewhat engaging.
Okay.
Right.
Because I think the big issue, especially with men's historical clothing, is that it kind of does have a bad reputation for being boring. And people kind of just see it as, just stuffy menswear.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people who are interested in it, they kind of are like, oh yeah, it's just a bunch of, old white guys sitting around a table at Harvard smoking a pipe being like, yes, this is quite exquisite. But there's so much more to that. And making it, you definitely learn all these little, and I do have a tendency to hyperfixate on some of the stuff. And I'll learn some new little detail and I get so excited about it, and then I start talking to my friends and stuff, and I see like the deer in the headlights look, where they're just like,
Yeah.
I have no earthly idea what you're talking about. Like, it's like, but sharing it with other people who are interested in it, they get it. But I think a lot of the other people who are interested in it, especially on social media, don't give it a lot of personality. It feels very clinical. Like, I've got a lot of friends that do the same thing I do, but a lot of their posts are very clinical. They're very academic, and they're not really entertaining. And so, unless you're really, really into it, you're going to just kind of, it's like reading a textbook. You're just going to kind of skip over it. It's like, so I try to kind of make it educational and entertaining.
Edutainment.
And that's kind of what I try, especially with like my TikTok and stuff like that, is to kind of combine some education and humor. And I haven't been posting on there lately. I kind of have not really had the time to really devote what I should to it.
Well, I think there's definitely a market for that. There definitely is a market especially on TikTok. I feel like on TikTok, I feel like people would get like really into historical like role plays and stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I've had a few of my TikToks I've posted in the past that have, straight up went viral. And so there's definitely a market for it. And it's just the big thing is just finding that balance. You don't want to be too goofy with it, and to the point where you're just somebody essentially just cosplaying, but you also don't want to be too academic where you kind of alienate your own audience because you're just too technical.
Right. It's a balance.
And with with what I do, and especially with the 1700 stuff, I do a lot of park service work. And the big thing, especially with that, is stating your sources. You don't just make stuff up. You've got to. This is what this is based on. This is what this comes from, and it's. Sometimes I can worry too much about that sort of thing, but I don't. I think it's a good thing, and especially now, with there being so much misinformation online. That's actually been, I think, one of the biggest takeaways that I've actually had from this that was totally unexpected. Is I didn't think, starting out making historical clothing, that I would actually be educating adults, not just from the US, but from a lot of countries, on our actual history. And especially doing 1700s, it's disheartening, and it's pretty amazing the amount of misinformation that people have been taught about especially about like the founding of the United States and things like that. And it was totally unexpected. I had no idea that was what I was going to be doing a lot of, is literally correcting people that Roxy, that what you were taught in high school isn't entirely accurate. So
that's just the American education system
there.
there.
Oh yeah, and it's been fortunate that the Park Service stuff in particular has really there's been a better push in recent years to be a lot more mindful, because a lot of historical sites prior to just the past few years were very, this was the founding of America and this was the birth of our nation kind of thing. But now they're starting to really kind of realize like, oh, there were a lot more moving parts to that.
Oh, of course.
And so like a lot of the forts that, and this is specifically speaking, again, from 1700s point of view. I know I've had a lot of friends that do like the more, 19th century Civil War stuff and all that, but I don't know anything about it. But as far as 18th century, it's, like one of the sites that I work at or do a lot of work at is Fort Dobbs out in Statesville, North Carolina. And that fort played a large role with the local native population. And so now they will not do a big event unless we can have people come out and represent Cherokee natives, because they're like, that is a part of the story that's not been told for the past 300 years, 275 years or whatever. I'd have to do the math on.
Yeah.
And we're not going to tell the story if we can't tell the full story.
Okay.
So it's been interesting. And I mean, every time period has misconceptions. I mean, I've dealt with them with Roman, I've dealt with them with medieval, Viking, any of the time periods I've done, you've got people that, have an opinion, but not a very good grasp of the factual stuff behind it. So that's another one of the big driving factors for doing what I do with Instagram and Facebook. Is it's like, not only am I posting business and I'm promoting my business, but I'm also, again, I'm trying to educate people a little bit on stuff.
That was actually something that Kevin brought it up a little bit earlier. I don't remember the exact conversation we were having, but it was something along the lines of me making the claim that anytime you see like those, those YouTube video compilations, like the evolution of like clothing throughout history, it's 90% of the time it's always women's clothing, because in my eyes, at the very least, men's clothing hasn't done that much, at least formal wear. Men's formal wear doesn't seem to have done that much evolution since like the 1920s. Like if you see any sort of like red carpet of it, it's always a tuxedo and it's always the same cut, the same colors, the same fabrics. And I was just like, this is why, like, history of fashion, it's always women's clothing that gets
because women's clothing has really, and men's stuff, as far as suits and stuff, has changed over the past 100 years. But
their ties, the ties used to be skinnier, right?
Yeah, ties have changed all over the place.
I knew it. I knew ties were skinnier. I knew it.
And like 20s up through 40s ties were super short too. And so I mean, that's what I was going to say is like, the thing is, it's it has changed, but it's been so minor that unless you're really into it, you're not going to know the difference. Like somebody like me can watch a TV show that's supposed to be set in the 40s and look and be like, no, they've got a 50s jacket on that guy or a 60s jacket on that guy. Like that's not the right jacket for that time period. Right. But the majority of people aren't going to know, because a suit is a suit. Like that's.
I mean, fair enough. Because like that, another thing is like you see people on YouTube making things like historical inaccuracies in like such and such period drama or whatever it is. And it's like, if somebody who's on the outside watch it, I'm like, wow, this like tiny, like little minute detail
Mhm.
I didn't notice, but it is sending this person into an absolute frenzy because it's completely changing everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, small stuff like that doesn't. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, small stuff like that doesn't really bother me.
Mhm.
It's when they miss the mark entirely, and especially if it's something that is supposed to be historical in a educational sense. Like
Oh,
the big example that I always use is the Vikings show on the History Channel.
oh, okay.
It's a History Channel production. So when people watch it, they're going to assume it's at least pretty well researched.
I mean, it's got the word history right there in the
But
channel
it
name.
is horrible. It is
No.
like literally they got nothing right as far
Oh
as
no.
imperial culture.
Wow, nothing.
Really?
All of the clothing is entirely wrong. Almost all the weaponry is wrong. The armor is wrong. Like the first season, the Anglo-Saxon cavalry are wearing helmets from the English Civil War, which was in the 1600s.
Oh my God,
So
really?
these helmets are literally like 900 years or 800 years off.
Wow, that's
Like
big.
it's
900
stuff
years
like that.
of-
And like one of my other big ones is King Arthur stuff. Like King
Okay.
Arthur is supposed to be set at the end of the Roman Empire, yet it's always high medieval and Renaissance. Like I always tell people that is like putting King Arthur in like Renaissance era stuff
Uh-huh.
is essentially the equivalent of making a movie about Vikings and dressing them like they're in the American Revolution.
Oh my
Like,
God.
Oof.
like literally, you know,
Yeah.
This actually brings me back to a thing that I love to roast Kevin for. He has nothing to do with it. It's just something he was part of. So the year after I graduated high school, he was in a production of Taming of the Shrew
Oh
at our
yes,
high school.
the Western version of it.
Yeah, it was Taming of the Shrew set in the American Wild West. And your reaction right there, everything, you just encapsulated it all. I actually left at intermission because it was maybe the weirdest show I've ever seen. And it was also so poorly done because you know that the costumes were just like Google Wild West. And then they also had a girl in brown face, which is a whole other kettle of fish we can't go into. Yeah, it was, oh God, school on Long Island.
well,
But yeah, it was just like,
a lot of the shows tend to have too. I actually had talked to someone a while back, and she had worked on. I know she'd worked on The Tudors. But she'd worked on quite a few historical drama, movie, and TV shows, and you know, like the conversation was like, you know, you're college educated on historical fashion. You obviously know your stuff. Why are all these movies and TV shows so inaccurate then? And the big issue, and especially with, you know, with a TV show like The Vikings and all that stuff, is they always say that the past is a country that you can never visit. And it's because, you know, even though it's our history, it's still so foreign to us. Like the thing, I mean, a lot of us have a hard time relating to our own grandparents because they're two generations back and they're so different. Their ideas and their mentality is so different from ours. Now imagine somebody 1,000 years ago or 2,000, how different they would be, regardless of being from a different country or a different continent. Like just their everything about how they interact with the world is going to be different. And fashion's the same way. And so the issue that they have is, you know, yeah, we know what people looked like during a lot of these time periods. We have artwork, we have, you know, we have paintings, we have carvings, we have manuscripts, we have all this stuff. But some of it is so foreign to modern people that if you did it 100% historically accurate, it'll draw them away from being able to relate to the characters.
It won't be as marketable.
And her big one was The Tudors. You know, like it's Tudor-esque. What especially like what the men are wearing. You know, but they've all got short modern haircuts. They've got like the shirts unbuttoned with their chest showing. And the reality is, like, you know, look at Henry VIII. You know, like they've got the puffy pants with like the huge cod piece that looks like they've got a giant erection and a bowl haircut. And so if you put someone trying to play Henry VIII in that, it's not going to be sexy. It's not going to be sexy to 21st century women that it's appealing to. And so modern people would be so taken aback by the outfits and the clothing and the way that people are acting that they'll have a hard time relating to the characters. And so they have to modernize them and soften them so you as a modern person can relate to them. And
makes sense.
One of the only recent things that's really come out that I can honestly say did a really good job on it was The Northman. I heard that movie was really good.
It
was really good, and they did a lot of research. A lot of the clothing is accurate. I mean, of course, there's little bitty things, but that's what you're never going to have it 100% correct. But as far as the way the director didn't pull the stops and say, you know what, I'm gonna make these characters a certain way so that they can be relatable. Like, he tried to stick with the traditional stuff from the Viking Age. And so you're watching this and you're like, man, this is not supposed to be a horror movie, but it really feels like a horror movie because just the normal practices and the normal religious practices are so foreign to us that they almost feel like they could be. It's almost like an uncanny valley effect.
Kind of like Midsommar almost.
Yes, I was actually going to say that. Midsommar is a prime example. Like, honestly, they don't really do anything evil in Midsommar, but because it's so foreign to us with our modern ideals, it feels
barbaric almost.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Northman is the same way. Like, what to them was a totally normal occurrence, to us we're like, Jesus Christ, like we're debating whether the death penalty is even moral. Meanwhile, this is a time period where a 7-year-old got caught stealing an apple, you're going to cut his hand off and hang it above your door. Like, that was a normal practice.
Okay.
So and no one thought anything about it. I mean, it wasn't even that long ago that it was, let's go take a picnic and go watch them hang the criminals on a Sunday.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like the stuff that we, like, one of the biggest things that puts it into perspective for a lot of people was, again, my grandfather was born in 1928. The U.S. government was still actively suppressing Native American rebellions out west and killing natives out west up until the 30s. So my grandfather, it was born during what we would still consider almost the Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when people talk about, oh, that's the past, the past is a lot closer than people think it was.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like a lot of people try to make it seem like the past was so long ago that
100 years is not very far away.
It's not that far.
No, I mean, my grandparents lived through all the Jim Crow desegregation. I mean, they remember when there was whites only signs in places. I mean, even my mom was born in 1963, like in my mom's generation.
I know. Yeah, that is wild to think about that.
So when people talk about, like Black Lives Matter and, terrorist, or go talk to your parents. Talk to your parents. My 60-year-old mom remembers. History is a lot closer than we think. We think of it as being separate from us, but somebody will be reading about what we're going through right now in a history book.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Oh my God. Imagine Kanye West in the history books. I
was thinking more along what was it? My friend's daughter is going to school right now. She's in whatever grade she's in. I can't remember. They're teaching her about freaking 9/11. And I told her that, I was in 4th grade when 9/11. And she goes, "You were alive back then?" And I was like, "Back then?" Yeah.
I mean, it's a historical event.
Yeah.
I mean, people will be reading about the war in Ukraine like we read about Vietnam or the
Absolutely.
Korean War.
Right.
Like that's the other weird, like almost existential crisis thing about history is that when we learn about history, we learn about history as being everything happening to a point. Like, I don't know, for example, Hitler's in World War I, and then Hitler does this. He joins the Nazi Party. He becomes Chancellor of Germany. World War II starts. But when that stuff was happening, none of these people knew that was the goal they were working toward. Like now we look at it and we go, wow, y'all were stupid. Like, look what y'all did. But when it was happening, no one went, are we going to start a world war? Like,
right, and that's what a lot of people are worried of right now. That's going on.
Right, and so when
because we're learning from history, we're learning from it. It's like we don't want to make the same mistakes.
We always think of history as being separate from us. We never think that we are living it right now. And so it's easy to open up a history book and look at all the pieces of information that we've picked out and we've discovered over the past however many years, and we formulated a big picture. But right now, there's so much stuff that goes on. You just know your own little bubble.
Right.
And what you can, pull up on your phone or on YouTube or on Facebook and read about. But, what's happening right now in 2022, we'll go read about 50 years from now and go, damn, I didn't even know that was happening.
Totally. And we'll have huge ass ties by then.
I mean, I don't know. They got skinny again. So
did they?
Yeah, that's like I was just in Express earlier, and I was like, "Damn, these are just like the little '50s ties."
Yeah,
they're just like the little
right
pencil ties.
Okay, so Caleb, so it's kind of funny. We were originally going to have our segments before we interview, but we kind of already did the interview now.
I know that's. I was wondering.
I know it's kind of wild. So, so we're actually going to. So we're almost at the 50-minute mark right now. So we're gonna quickly go through our segments right now, and
I can hyperfixate next week. It's totally fine.
All right. Well, I'll just quickly go over my news segment. So we do have some news right now. So with my segment, sounds gay. I'm in.
Stop trying.
Okay. All right. So the first bit of news is the holiday sitter teases gunkles in Christmas sweaters.
What?
The Holiday Sitter, Hallmark Channel's first holiday movie centered on an LGBTQ couple, is the latest holiday movie to feature a queer romance following the footsteps of other recent entries like The Happiest Season, Dashing in December, and Single All the Way. In the first preview for the film, Jonathan Bennett is on gunkle duty with Gerald Krisa, who he ends up falling for and cuddling up with in the perfect Christmas sweaters.
That was nauseating.
That
was a lot.
What are your guys' thinks about the word gunkle?
I hate it. It's oh my god.
I don't like it either.
It's got the word gunk right in it.
Diagnosed with at the doctor,
yeah.
Like, hey, my ankle is hurting. Oh yeah, you got a gunkle.
Oh god.
Yeah, because it's got the word gunk in the title.
You need to get that gunkle checked out.
Gunk.
Yeah, it's almost like a pejorative of cankle.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it is.
Not pejorative. What's the word?
But
derivative.
you know what? I'm glad that we're getting some more representation in media. Hallmark channels.
Make one more question. Why do I feel like this article is making the same claim that every article that says like Disney reveals first ever gay character? Haven't we already had like enough gay romance Hallmark movies?
Disney did recently release a movie with the first gay lead character.
Okay, I will give you that one, but like
the movie Strange World, which is in theaters right now, which I feel like I do have to say because
we are not sponsored. Because
Disney's certainly not sponsoring this movie, so hell, I'll do it for free.
Jesus.
You're welcome, Disney.
Oh yeah, they really need you, Kevin.
Well, they need someone because nobody knows. Caleb, have you even heard of this movie, Strange World? Exactly. This is my point. This is a Disney
Meanwhile,
movie.
when I told you that there was no advertising for it, you were like, Connor, you're crazy. I see ads
I
all
thought
over
you
the
were
place."
crazy because I thought that I knew about the movie, but then again,
I have no idea what it's even about.
'Cause-
Never heard of it.
yes. Basically, the movie is about this family that explores, well, a strange world. They go to it because this power source that they have is failing, and they need to go to the source of the power. But the one thing leads to another, and they end up inside this like crazy world that's like underground.
And also, there's a gay.
Yes, and one of the main characters is gay. He has a crush on a boy, and it's not entirely relevant to the plot. I saw this movie, by the way. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. It's mainly about like father-son relations. Like it's basically about 3 generations of men in the same family, and it's like that's kind of what the main theme of the movie is. You say ugh, but you know it does have a nice message.
I'm thinking about the relationship to the men in my own family. I don't want to get to know.
Well,
like,
I don't know. Maybe take your dad to see this movie. Maybe he'll learn a thing or two.
No.
I don't know. But yeah, and also like here's another funny thing about this movie is that even though it's the most male-centric Disney movie that Disney's made in years, it still manages to pass the Bechdel test.
How?
Two women. Though there are women in the movie. There are women in the movie. They're just not the main characters.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and they managed to talk to each other about something other than men.
We do love that. All right. Well, what is your next segment, please?
Okay. So, yes. So yeah, go see Strange World. So my next story is Senate passage Respect for Marriage Act in bipartisan vote.
We did see this. This was a great thing.
Yes. So on Tuesday, November 9th, the Senate passed the landmark Respect for Marriage Act in a 61-36 vote. The bill received bipartisan support with 12 Republicans voting in favor of the bill. According to the New York Times, the bill would repeal the Defense of Marriage Act, which denied federal benefits to same-sex couples. It prohibits states from denying the validity of out-of-state marriage based on sex, race, or ethnicity. After passing the Senate, the bill now heads to the House of Representatives for final approval before being sent to President Biden's desk, where he will sign the bill into law. The United States is on the brink of reaffirming a fundamental truth. Love is love, and Americans should have the right to marry the person they love, Biden said in a statement. So so this is good news.
We do love, and I also feel comfortable.
And history, it's history. History is progressing.
I will say comfortable, like it's good that this is happening during the Biden administration because literally anybody else, there's a chance it wouldn't go through. Like I'm not over here being rah Biden by any stretch of the imagination, but like
rah Biden.
No. This would never have flown with Trump. God forbid we get DeSantis in office. Fuck no. So, like, I'm glad this is happening now while we still have a chance.
We went from having a president who was a monster to a president who's a little monster.
That wasn't funny, Kevin. Please stop.
Rah. Okay, so that's it. So that's actually the only news that I have for this week. Not a lot, but that's okay because we have a guest. So you know, it's convenient. It works out. Somehow it always works out. There's like not a lot of news whenever we have guests. It's somehow always works out.
We do have a couple of short, like we have a very short amount of time. I'm just gonna dive right into my hyperfixation of the week. This is super duper quick because I had plans to go a bit more in depth with this, but like again, we have a guest. I'm just gonna go over cursory details and be like, this is what I was like talking about for the past couple of days. Okay, so Kevin and Caleb, have you ever heard the story of The Boy in the Box?
No.
Yes.
Okay. So The Boy in the Box was the name given to a 3 to 7 year old boy whose naked, extensively beaten body was found on the side of a road in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1957.
Holy shit.
I know. Intense details immediately. This was like one of the biggest unsolved mysteries, like for a long time, for like 62 years, something like that. This child was found like relatively well manicured, fresh haircut, clean nails, horrifically beaten, I should probably mention. But the biggest thing here is that the police were notified about this. Nobody knew who this boy was. Nobody knew who he belonged to, where he came from. He was found in a box that was originally contained a baby bassinet. So people are contacting like the people who made the bassinet company and be like, who bought this bassinet from you a couple of days ago? All leads pointed to nothing. So this child, unfortunately, was buried unidentified and was buried with the name of America's Forgotten Child, or America's Lost Child, I believe.
Something like
America's Unknown Child.
Yeah.
On November 30th of 2020, literally 4 days ago, with the advancement of like modern DNA and stuff like this.
Well, wait, you mean 2 years ago?
No, 2 days ago. I'm sorry. I said 2020. I'm sorry.
You said 2020. Yeah.
I know, 2022. Okay. 4 days ago, they have made enough advancements with like DNA testing and like evidence collection. Police have reason to believe that we now have an identity for this boy from 1957.
Wow.
And they feel comfortable that they could release a name for him within the next month or so.
I haven't heard that yet.
Wow.
And this came across my For You page on TikTok, and it has been blowing my mind because I love like unsolved mysteries and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk about a child as if he's lost media, but
oh my God, got her.
But that's like the Nick, I'm going to quit the show if you do that again.
Oh,
this is a human life we're talking about. But it was just absolutely like mind-blowing to me. It was like when stuff like this happens, when we discover stuff that we previously thought like completely unattainable and just like lost to time.
Well, it's like the two girls in, was it Delphi, Indiana, that had been murdered like 10 years ago, and they like posted a picture on like Snapchat of this dude following them, and it's like been years that they've not been able to find the guy, and then they just caught him like a month ago.
Yeah. It's like,
this does sound familiar.
And the part that was so crazy about it was that they had the police composite sketch in the bar that was like his favorite bar in town on the wall, and he would intentionally sit next to it if the seat was always available. And
that's
like,
gross.
Yeah. And like, would even like they said he would even like strike up conversations about it, like, oh, you think they're ever going to catch that guy? Like, and
that's something that a killer would do. They get cocky.
Yeah.
Oh God. But with the case with this boy, like in terms of like trying to find his identity, you know, the police like posted photos of him being like, have you seen this boy? They made like, you know, forensic sketches of what he looked like when he was alive. Absolutely nobody was able to come forward. There was one woman, she was known as Martha or M, brought forward in February 2002, a woman identified by Martha, went to the police and said, my mother purchased this illegally. She claimed that he went by the name of Jonathan from his birth parents in the summer of 1954. He was subjected to extreme physical abuse, and the last night she saw him alive, he threw up his dinner of baked beans and was severely beaten and thrown into the box and killed. And the police were like, oh my God, how did she know? His stomach contained baked beans. And they inevitably said that, oh no, she's like, we can toss her testimony out. She's unreliable because she's mentally ill. And like that right there already, don't discount people with mental illness. They have a lot to contribute.
Right.
But it's just like the amount of stuff that like all came together and nobody ever tried to like dig further into it because of like, they're like, we don't trust her. It's fine. But now we finally, like, there's a good chance we might have a name for this kid. He might get a proper burial. I mean, he has a proper burial site, but it just says unknown child. That's everybody wants their name on their memorial site, you know?
Which is sad. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. But that was entirely my hyperfixation of the week. I was just like, congratulations.
I mean, yeah, that's something to be hyperfixated on. I mean,
I was interested at the very least.
Woo!
So anyway, more or less, I think that's the entire show. We've been talking for quite some time.
We have. We're pretty. Yeah, we like to make it to like the hour mark
before people tune us out.
Yeah.
But Kayla, thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot just talking to you for the time we did.
Yes, Kayla. Before we go, would you like to plug all your stuff one more time?
Yeah. If you're interested in the historical stuff and the education part or anything like that, you know, my Facebook and my Instagram are my two big ones that I send people to that way. If you're more interested in the vintage clothing part, my Etsy shop is down here also.
Right, your Etsy shop is
I can't find there. Okay.
Broadaxe. Your Etsy shop is Broadaxe Vintage, correct?
Yes.
And
the Facebook is Broadaxe Historical Clothing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's really the
long and short of it.
Yeah.
Long and short.
All right.
All right.
If you would like to follow Kevin and myself, you can follow Kevin at his social medias at.
Yes. My social medias are It's Kevin O'Lear. That's ITSKEVINOLEAR on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Twitch.
You were able to spell it without closing your eyes this time.
And you can follow me. Connor, I am going to flay you alive.
And then
I'm going to put you in a box.
Maybe inappropriate. We'll get back to that.
Okay, yeah, maybe that was going a little too far. And you can follow me on YouTube at Kevo Productions.
Oh my God, Kevin, what the fuck?
Okay, yeah, that was going a little too far. I will admit.
Next week, join us when Kevin makes a whole comedy hour about the Jonathan A. Ramsey murders. Oh God. If you would like to follow me on social media, you can do so. You can follow my TikTok at Connor K Fitz 92, on Instagram at Connor K Fitz, and my Twitter at Connor F from LI. And as always, you can follow Fruity Cereal across all social medias at Fruity Cereal. Fruity like the fruit, cereal like the number.
Or like the Kevin, I am apparently.
Kevin, what you said was on par with the car crash theater thing with Diana. Holy
okay,
shit.
Fine. Okay, fine. That's fine. We're even. We're even on that.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you once again for joining us, Caleb.
Yes,
and
thank you,
we will
Caleb.
see the rest of the audience next week, Monday at 9 a.m.
All right.
We will see you there.